Hi, if you are considering moving to Sweden or you are already living in Sweden and trying to figure out your housing situation, you have probably asked yourself, will it be better to buy an apartment or renting an apartment will be a better choice? And more importantly, which option actually makes more sense financially for your situation? If that question has been on your mind, then you are at right place. Welcome to this video. Today, I'm going to talk to you about endless discussion of buying versus renting an apartment in Sweden. I'm not just going to give you general advice like buying an apartment is better or renting an apartment will be a safer. Instead, I'm going to show you exactly how to calculate which option works best for your situation using an Excel sheet that I have created for you, and you are free to download it from the link mentioned in the description below. So let's decode this together with me and my favorite Excel sheet. Before we jump into the number, I want to say something very important. Buying an apartment is not only a financial decision, but it's also an emotional decision that you need to make. For many people, owning a house is like a dream. They have emotional attachment with their home and they feel like they have owned something. They feel very safe and secure, and they also feel lot of freedom on that. And honestly, there is no formula in the world that can measure such emotion and the feeling. I can only help you to make the decision better financially. Before moving to Excel sheet, let's look at the apartment that you wanted to buy. I have randomly chosen an apartment in Gothenburg at Hemnet. It's a quite decent 3-room apartment of 75 square meter. It's relatively newly built apartment in year 2020. The cost of the apartment is around 3.95 million kroner, and you need to pay around 4,475 kroner per month to the housing association as an avgift or a maintenance fee. So now let's calculate the mathematics behind the apartment and decide whether it will be better to buy this apartment or will it be beneficial to rent this apartment instead. First of all, let's understand the concept of rental yield. Let's suppose you are renting an apartment and you are paying 10,000 kroner as a monthly rent. So in a complete year, you need to pay around 120,000 kroner as a rent. And now, if you want to buy the same apartment, then let's suppose the cost of the apartment is 3 million kroner. So if we divide the cost of the apartment with the annual rent of the apartment, then you will get the rental yield of that apartment. So in this case, if we divide 3 million kroner with 120,000 kroner, then you will get the rental yield of the apartment and it will be around 4%. That's quite decent rental yield according to the Swedish standard. Now this is our calculator that will help you to decide whether buying an apartment is better or renting an apartment will be a better choice instead. Here you need to feed your real data in the green cells only, and you do not need to make any changes in the rest of the cells. For such calculations, first you need to decide for how many years at least you will be living in that apartment. If you have that clarity in mind from the very beginning, it will be very helpful to make the decision wisely. Now let's suppose you will be living in that apartment for at least 20 years. As we see in the advertisement, the cost of the apartment is around 3.95 million kroner. And if you want to rent the same apartment, then the rent of that apartment can easily be around 11,000 kroner per month. So in a year, you have to pay around 132,000 kroner as the annual rent. So the rental yield of the apartment comes up as only 3.34% only. Now you also need to consider the inflation in Sweden. Historically, the inflation in Sweden is lying in between around 2 to 3%. I know Sweden has witnessed very high inflation during the post-COVID era, but now things are settling down. So for this calculation, let's consider the inflation in Sweden is around 3% only. Now let's do the calculation for buying this apartment. As we see, the cost of the apartment was around 3.95 million kroner. Additionally, you also need to pay around 1.5% of the cost of the apartment in the form of registration fee, stamp duty, or transfer fee, whatever you want to call it. So the registration amount you need to pay around 59,000 kroner. And then you also need to pay around 15% of the cost of the property as a down payment. I know from the year 2026 the down payment requirement is reduced to 10% only. But for this calculation, let's consider the down payment is still 15%. So the down payment amount you need to pay is around 592,000 kroner. So the total upfront money including the registration fee and your down payment will be around 651,000 kroner that needs to be in your pocket to buy this apartment. Now for the rest of the amount you need to borrow from the bank. And you need to borrow around 3.3 million kroner from the bank to buy this apartment. The interest rate on the mortgage can easily be varying in between 2 to 3% depending on your income profile. So for this case, let's say the interest rate on your mortgage is around 3% and the loan duration in Sweden is by default 50 years. If you take a mortgage loan in Sweden, then you also get some kind of tax benefit from the government. And you will get back around 30% of the interest paid in a year in the form of tax benefit. However, this benefit is limited to only 100,000 kroner interest paid in a year. So if you are paying more than 100,000 kroner as an interest in a year, then you will still get the benefit only for the 100,000 kroner that you paid in the form of interest. So the effective interest rate in your first month will be around 5,900 only. And this amount will be reduced gradually as you repay your principal amount back to the bank. Now the total effective interest that you need to pay is around 1.1 million kroner over the period of 20 years. But this value will be equivalent to only 0.87 million kroner at the end of 20 years because of inflation. Now you also need to repay your principal amount and typically you need to pay 2% of the total loan amount every year. So in your first month, you need to pay around 5,600 as a principal amount and this amount will be same for the whole duration of the loan. So over the period of 20 years, you need to pay around 1.3 million kroner as your interest amount back to the bank and this value will be equivalent to only 1 million kroner because of inflation. Since your total duration of the loan is 50 years and you are making the calculation only for 20 years, then at the end of 20 years, you are still borrowing around 1.1 million kroner to the bank after the inflation adjustment. Additionally, you also need to pay month's avgift to the housing association and you see in the advertisement it was around 4,475 kroner per month. Let's assume this month's avgift will be increased by 1% every year. This increment will be totally depend on the financial health of your housing association. So the total avgift amount that you need to pay over the 20 years is around 1.1 million kroner. And because of inflation, it will be equivalent to 0.8 million kroner only. So the total cost of buying the apartment is around 3.3 million kroner, including your principal, interest, and the avgift that you need to pay. But over this 20 years, the value of the property will also go up. And let's assume the value of this property is grown by 4% every year. So the value of your property is now around 4.8 million kroner after 20 years. But at the end of 20 years, you are still owing some money from the bank. And if you subtract that amount from the value of the property, then the net in hand value of the property will be around 3.6 million kroner. Now at the end, the net benefit of buying this apartment is 268,000 kroner. Net benefit of buying the apartment is nothing but your net in hand value of the property minus total cost of the property that you are paying over the 20 years. Now let's look at the other side of the picture. Let's assume instead of buying, you choose to rent the same apartment. Then the rent of this apartment can easily be around 11,000 kroner. Therefore, you need to pay around 132,000 kroner as an annual rent for the first year. And let's assume your rent will be increased by 4% every year. So the total rent you will be paying over this 20 years will be almost equivalent to 3.9 million kroner. This value is almost equivalent to the current cost of the property. But this value after 20 years will be equivalent to only 2.8 million kroner because of inflation. Now, since you choose to rent the apartment, I believe you are still having the total upfront capital in your pocket that you can invest somewhere. Now, you can also invest some additional amount every month because your rent will be much lower than the sum of interest, principal, and the avgift that you need to pay every month when you are buying the apartment. Now, let's assume you can generate the return on investment of around 8% every year. Then the value of your upfront capital will be around 3 million kroner, and because of inflation, it will be equivalent to 1.6 million kroner only. Now, the value of the additional amount that you are investing every month will be equivalent to around 1.1 million kroner, and because of inflation, it will be depreciated to zero point 0.6 million kroner only. So, at the end, the net benefit of renting this apartment is in negative 485,000 kroner. The net benefit of renting the apartment is nothing but the value of your investment minus the total amount of the rent that you are paying over the years. So, in this case, the negative value indicates that the value of the investment has grown much lesser than the total amount of the rent that you are paying over the years. So, for this case, buying an apartment makes lot of sense. Now let's consider another scenario. Instead of 20 years, if you choose to live for 50 years, then this suggestion is switched from buying an apartment to renting an apartment. Now let's suppose instead of 8%, if you can generate 10% return on investment, then this calculator is still suggesting renting the apartment is more beneficial compared to buying the apartment. So there are a lot of permutation and combination that you need to play around. So use this calculator, feed you real data, make multiple scenario, and make the decision that suits best for your situation. Well, Swedish market is very unique in their own ways. There is no one size fit all the answers to buying versus renting question. Even though this calculator suggests renting the apartment would be a better choice for your case, but still you need to ask yourself honestly that am I a kind of the person who will actually invest in a disciplined way over a long period of time? Because here is the reality. If you choose to live in the rental apartment but you are not consistently investing your saving, then you are not really benefiting from the renting the apartment. In that case, buying the apartment in Sweden might actually be a better option for you in the long run. On the other hand, if you are disciplined, if you invest regularly, and you value the flexibility, then renting an apartment will be a very powerful financial strategy. At the end of the day, the best housing decision is the one that aligns with your financial goal, your lifestyle, your income stability, and your future plans. So use this data, trust the math, and make an informed decision. I really hope you find this video very helpful and it gave you the more clarity about buying versus renting the apartment in Sweden. If you would like me to make the more videos on any topic related to money, wealth, investment or personal finance in Sweden, let me in the comment below. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.